Hey guys, Steve Dempster, Guitar Evolutions. I can't change where the sun's coming from right now. We're going to have to deal with it a little bit. Today's video, I'm going to ask one question, and that is simply, what do you see when you look down at your fretboard? And we're going to talk about the layers that are possible, ultimately to help you feel freer over the fretboard and in more control. And we're going to talk about that right after this. Okay, so what I want to do is show you one chord on the fretboard. Hopefully I'm in good frame here. And ask you the one question that I mentioned in the intro. And that is, what do you see when you look down at this chord? It's a nice sound. Now, you may or may not know the chord, but if you do, you might say to yourself, oh, well, that looks like the chord D minor 7. And you'd be right, it is. But the question again is, what do you see? Well, some of you might see a shape with certain fingers sitting in certain frets on certain strings, and it takes on that shape. Good. That's a piece of information that you want to know. Some of you might see when I make that chord shape, you might see the root of the chord, which is the note upon which the name of the chord is based. So you might see that as a D note upon which the chord is named. And these, the chord images are up here somewhere on my screen. I never know what side I'm going to put them on. Others of you with perhaps more experience, more information, might look down at the same chord, and you actually see the notes that make it up. I can look down at it and go, okay, well, there's a D, an A, a C, an F, and another A that make up that chord. Now, depending on what level or what layer you see when you look at it, that's going to completely determine how you feel about working with the chord, what information it's giving you that could tell you some other things you could do with it. That's the whole point. If you see the shape, in most cases, you're limited to the shape. If you know that there's a root, well, there would be, of course, but if you know where the root is, that's the beginning of understanding how chords are structured and a little bit about your fretboard, where things are located. If you see all the notes of the chord, you're in a really good place, because chances are you'll be able to manipulate those notes to create interesting ways of playing the same chord. And that's always fun and cool to do. So the attempt here, or the goal here rather, is to help you make some connections between one idea that I'm about to show you and how that idea is going to allow you to understand a certain thing about this chord. And once that thing's understood, it will allow you to learn the next thing, and then the next thing. There could be many other things, but I'm just going to keep it at 3 things. And I'm just going to call them Thing 1, Thing 2, and Thing 3, just like in Dr. Seuss, if any of you have read that stuff. Okay, so let's get started. The very first thing that I'm going to suggest you should know, either before you learn this chord or alongside of the chord, is, in this case, the C major scale. Now, What we're going to talk about today, it can apply to any key, but we're choosing the key of C because it's kind of easier to work in to get the principle across, and then you can apply it across any of the other keys that you might be interested in exploring. And here comes the bright sunshine coming in. It's kind of a nice looking shadowy effect, but I know it's harsh on the video, but I have to deal with it right now. Okay, so thing number one, and it's a big one, is you've got to know your major scales. At least one, and I'm going to do this, as I said, in the key of C, and I'm going to play it across one string. And I'm going to show you why this is so important to know in a moment. So here's the scale. By the way, if you have any trouble with what I'm about to talk about, go and check out the playlist above here, one of the cards, and hunt for the major scale construction videos that talk about this. I'm not going to talk about it here because it's already there. Okay, so we've got a C, moving to a D. This is all on one string. Moving to an E, moving to an F, a G, an A, a B, and finally C. In the language of intervals, we could say something like whole tone between the C and the D, whole tone between D and E, semitone between E and F, F to G is a whole tone, G to A is a whole tone, A to B is a whole tone, and then B to C is a semitone. That tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone formula, critical to know. And that formula applies to any major scale, even though the notes change. Again, check out the card above and take a look through those previous videos. Now, the same thing done on one string, of course, can be translated across strings. So I could do this. Which is exactly the same as this. They're the same pitches. Sorry. Okay, you get the idea. Now, knowing that, however innocent that may appear, and it is something that a lot of guitarists skip over, because what they get introduced to, of course, is this. That beautiful minor pentatonic thing. They get used to that first. I'm going to suggest do that, but do this as well. Or this. Okay? Now, that thing, that's the big one. Thing number one leads us to thing number two. Thing number two says that if you know your major scale, you therefore also can or should understand that each note of that scale we can build a chord on, and all of those chords plus all of those notes taken together as one big pile of information becomes the key. It's a very bright light, I get it. It becomes the key that you're playing in. Make sense? Cool. So, what are the chords? Well, it would end up with, if I go along the string, there'd be a chord based on C. It's called C major, 7. There'd be a chord based on D, which is D minor 7. That's the chord we're working with today. E minor 7. F major 7. G dominant 7. Oops. whoops, A minor 7, B minor 7 with a flat 5, or B half diminished, returning to C major. That's where the chords of the key that you're playing in come from. They come from that scale. If you don't know the scale, you may have trouble understanding that connection to the chords. That's vital. And in our case, the D minor 7 chord happens to be the 2 chord in the key of C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chord, and then 7 chord. So that happens to be the 2 chord in the key of C. Good. That's a nice thing to know. Now, the D minor 7 chord has the notes D, F, A, and C in it. That's what makes it up. I'm not going to discuss how chords are built in this video right now. There's a discussion again of that in the series up above here, but go check that out. But the basic idea will be that let's take the notes from that C major scale and play the D, the F, the A, and the C. Now that's along one string, which is a good thing to be able to do because it's helping with your fretboard knowledge, isn't it? You're forced to think about where the next note is in the chord on the fretboard. D, there's E, F is right next door. Next note, D, F, A. Well, if that's F, this has to be G, and that has to be A. So we have D, F, A, and then finally B moving to C. Those are the notes. Sorry again about the brightness of that. I'll come in a little bit there, get rid of it, okay? And then again, you can play that across the strings just as we did with the major scale. D, F, A, C. And we can repeat it. D, F, A, C. Or you could go D, F, A, C. Or you could go D, F, A, C. Or D, D, F, A, C. And D, F, A, C. They're everywhere. That's the point. So the major scale knowledge allows you to know the chord knowledge, which allows you to know the arpeggio knowledge. That's what we're basically playing, D, F, A, C. Now you put those notes together in this kind of a structure because you can't strum this. That's the arpeggio. The notes of the chord broken up and played wherever you wish to play them. But when you bring them together in that particular format, now you have D followed by an A, a C, F, and another A. So they're the same notes, they're just arranged in a different order. Okay, knowing all that allows us to get to thing number 3. This is an area where a lot of students, they either don't reach it in their playing, probably because they've had so much fun and success working with what they already know, or they interpret it as being too difficult, too hard on the head. Usually, it's too hard on the head when the previous things that I just talked about haven't been covered. You just kind of throw the concept at the student and they're going, oh, I don't know what to do with this. Things have not been laid out in a proper fashion. Major scale, thing number 1, allows you to understand thing number 2, which is where chords come from, which allows you to understand, which includes arpeggios, which allows you to understand thing number 3, which is you can play the same chord knowing the notes that make it up, in all kinds of different locations on your fretboard. That's the point. That's what we're trying to get at. And all of this is to help you go, when I look down at this D minor 7 chord, what do I see? Do I see it as the 2 chord in the key of C? Maybe. It's in other keys as well, but this is the one we're focused on. Do I see a D minor 7 chord and I can at least point out where the root note is? That's good. I can see that. Do I see the notes of the chord? D, A, C, F, A, laid out in that fashion. Can I see them in this fashion? D, F, A, C. When I look down at that chord. Can I see those same notes anywhere else? D, F, A, C, relating to that chord. D, F, A, C. Can I do this on a different string? D, F, A, C. Do you get what I'm talking about? What you see when you look down at this is completely determined by what experience you have to date. So thing number 3 is all about finding different ways to play D minor 7. Now why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just go and get a big thick book of 55,000 chords and look the darn thing up and see what you find? You could, and you would learn about it and you would have to memorize it. But you would end up having to memorize a whole lot of chords rather than just knowing one idea, how they're made up, and just go and make them up. So now that I know what notes make up the chord, I just go and find those notes, put them together in some interesting way, and I've got myself a D minor 7. So we know this one. That's one. Let's go find another. Here's one. We've got a D on the 4th string, open. F would be here, A would be there, on the 3rd string, 2nd fret, and C is on the 2nd string, 1st fret. You put those 4 notes together and you've got a D minor 7 chord. It's the same chord as this. It looks different. Yeah, it's a different shape, which is why shape isn't always your best friend. Shape is a tool that we guitarists do use a lot of. We rely on it a lot. But if it's the only way you understand the guitar, then it's going to be a hard go to make sense of more advanced concepts as you go along. Okay? How about this? Let's take a D here on the 2nd string, 3rd fret. Play the open D. We can do that. The A is on the same 3rd string, 2nd fret. The C is now down here on the 5th string, and here's the F. So here's the chord. Interesting sound. A little thick, a little dissonant, but that's okay. It's still a D minor 7 chord. It's got a D, F, A, and C, but the C is down here now. I'm putting it there because I know there's a C there, not because I saw a picture, and not because somebody showed me that particular form of the chord. Why don't we do this? Why don't we take a D here and take an F here, play the A open. Now this is a bit of a stretch, but it's kind of cool. And there's a C up on the 4th string, 10th fret. So we have this now. I got to dip my shoulder to be able to pull this off. So here we have A, and a C, and a D, and an F. So we'd have D, F, A, C, and put it together. Now it's not strummable like around the campfire, but it could be useful, you know, if and you know, if you happen by mistake, sometimes happy accidents happen, you hit the open E string. Ooh, what a beautiful sound. That could inspire a new song, or it's just a lovely sound that you hang with, but it's a little, it's that right there. It's got that little dissonance in there. So it speaks to the fact that how the notes of any chord are arranged can completely affect how you and I hear it. And I think that's a really remarkable effect. How about this one? We could go D, F, A, C. Get the idea? And of course, D, F, A, C, and another A here. You can always double notes up as necessary to fill out the chord and thicken it up. In terms of wanting to strum it, to cover more strings, that's always open to you to do. Now, of course, when looking down at this chord, if you're aware that it comes from the key of C and it's the second chord in the key of C, if you keep the key of C in mind, this is always floating around in the background. Somewhere. Anywhere else. Sorry. If you have an awareness of that C major scale everywhere, then if you think on this for a moment, and this is an interesting point, that the D minor 7 chord, in a way, has to sit within a C, that is S-E-A, or an ocean, of the notes of C major. It has to, because the chord itself came or evolved from that key, that scale. So that means you might see not only the notes of the chord, but you might see surrounding those notes additional notes from the key you're in. Let me give you an example. So if I play the D minor 7, the root note D has the note C below it. I could play the E or the F. And I could take advantage of that knowledge to do stuff like this. I could go. Now, anytime I do that, if I'm sitting somewhere with a group of players and I just bring that out, they go, like, how do you know what notes to play that move you into the chord? I get asked this all the time. Well, you have a few options. You can simply be shown something to play. You would call it a lick, if you will, or a riff. You can be shown that by someone else who knows it for whatever reason, or you could discover it through another video or a book or something. But it's not necessarily giving you the context of where those notes came from. It's just showing you to do it. That's more often the case. Here, you're forced to think about how that chord sits within that ocean. And you're free to come up with your own licks. How to do this. That's, and you take it as far as you like. You could go. I could do the same thing around the A note. If I think about it, in the key of C, I know there's a G here, there's the A, and there's the B. You know, you pick and choose notes that are relatively close to where the chord is, so you can get back to the chord in a decent time. So now I've got this, right? And you can keep repeating this process until, through experimentation and noodling and Saturday afternoon just picking your guitar up and figuring this stuff out, you could come up with your own little riffs to stick in. No big deal. So if I go to the C note within the chord, I could play the D, I could play the B below it. I can do whatever I want because I know where those notes are. This is where your fretboard knowledge starts to come into play. And again, if that's weak, Well, it's weak for a lot of players. We have to work on it in the long term. But if you don't do it, nothing happens. If you do it with a little bit of awareness with every practice you have, then you're in a better position to take a little bit of it and just kind of absorb it into your system. 1 or 2 extra notes over the course of months will get you started real nicely. So it's not this game where you read those images of C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, G, G sharp. Trying to memorize the fretboard that way, very useless as far as I'm concerned. It's better to memorize it in the context of something musical. So again, back to my C note, I could pick the C, B, or D. Not interesting. And I could keep on going. Interestingly enough, I could, if I wanted to, I could see 2 notes happening. That's a C and an E. Might as well play them together. So I could go. Why stop there? C and E, D and F, E and G. These are all notes that are surrounding the D minor 7 chord. So I could go. You see what's happening here. Organically, through your own knowledge of getting information in the right order, in the right sequence, all of a sudden, the mystery of where notes get played in and around chords, again, it's a big topic for a lot of people, that's how it happens. And then what happens is some of those combinations just sound really good to your ear, so you tend to use them a lot. They become a lick, and they get shown to somebody else, and so on, and so on, and so forth. But it has to start with someone. Now, of course, you could discover this just sort of randomly, just by using your ear and no knowledge of the notes. And if you can do that, more power to you. It still is never a bad idea to know the actual notes on the fretboard. So let's bring this back into the bigger context now. I started with the question, what do you see? Some of you see only a shape, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It is all you see. You see a shape, just like you see a C as a shape, a shape, a shape. Then your fingers get so used to making that shape, that's how you do it. What happens then is that every time you see the chord written or you're told to play it, you play the one that your fingers remember. And again, in and of itself, nothing wrong with it. It is an important part of playing the guitar. But there are other layers. We could zoom in further with the microscope and resolve down further and further to get even more information out to be able to do more with the chord. So in our case, D minor 7. To get that information lower down, you need to have been exposed to previous concepts, not just the chord and then show them an arpeggio shape and then give them a lick to play around it. Yet it's still useful, but it doesn't have a context. So the context here is, okay, realizing that the D minor 7 is the 2 chord in the key of C. That's a little bit of important information because we talk about 2-5-1s or 1-6-4-5. We name out chords often in using numbers, so that's useful. And so a big thing, 1 was knowing that it comes from the key of C, you should know your C major scale. Not just a shape, like a finger pattern with dots and such, but know the notes. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. 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 The more you know this over the fretboard, ultimately the more free you're going to be able to play. There's just no way around it. So any sense of frustration that you may experience with regards to knowing what you could play if you wanted to in and around that chord, it won't come out of you because you're not aware of that other layer, the layer of the notes that make it up. So we've got the C major scale. Knowing that led to the reality of knowing that the chord itself happened to be made up of the notes D, F, A, and C. And when we arrange those in a little more of a finger-friendly way, we get this, D, F, A, C. And again, that can be done anywhere on the fretboard, D, F, A, C. Or I could go D, F, A, C. Or D, F, A, C. Anywhere. I could go D, where am I here? D, F, A, C. Not very practical, but there it is. So that's the arpeggio of the chord, would be playing out the notes. If I take the chord and arpeggiate it, that's doing this. Coming up with some kind of a nice harp-like pattern. Playing the notes of the chord one at a time, that's called arpeggiating the chord. But when I play the chord's arpeggio, I'm isolating the notes, playing them in order for practice reasons, and then back down. Any combination is useful all over the fretboard. So that's a good thing to be aware of. With the knowledge of thing two, the notes that exist within the chord, I could then make decisions about where will I play the chord. I could play it here. We came up with a nice one here. I like this one. D and F and A and C. There it is. And then, you know, I hit the E on occasion. Very nice. I like that. Notice how that sounds nice with this E, but if I put the low E into it, it doesn't sound quite as nice to my ear. Could work as a movie score, potentially, but as a chord, I don't tend to like it so much. So that's just a subjective thing. Okay, and that leads you to understand thing number three, which is the chord, whatever chord you're coming up with to play for D minor 7, that there's a background ocean, that's my analogy, of the C major scale. All the notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, they're all sitting in and around the chord, which makes you see that not only could you play the chord, but you can play notes around the chord, and then obviously that leads you to be able to build riffs and licks and such. So, what can you get from all of this stuff that I just showed you? I've got a few bullet points here. Obviously, you can learn new shapes for the chord that you've been introduced to. You do not have to stick with that. It could be the one you need, but you don't have to stick with it. You can make your own licks from these structures, because not only do you see the chord and the notes that make it up, but by knowing the notes that make it up, you can move to the other notes in and around it from the key of C to make up licks. Now, your rhythm skills and all your articulations have to come into play to make the thing sound interesting, with bends and slides and double stops and all that kind of stuff, but the concept is still very solid. By doing so, this is a really nice musical way of getting you to learn the fretboard, paying attention to where notes are located in the context of a musical idea, the minor 7 chord in this case. Of course, all of that allows you to move a little more freely over the fretboard, slowly at first, because it takes time to absorb this stuff, very slowly at first. How long that lasts, that's up to you. The persistence, the repetition of doing this is what solidifies your knowledge of the fretboard in the long run. Okay, so there you have it. Some of you will see a chord shape when you look down on the fretboard. Some of you will see a chord shape and maybe a root note. Some of you will see the notes of the chord, and maybe some of you will see the notes of the chord in that ocean of C major. Now, again, all of that sort of advancing knowledge is dependent on previous stuff that you should have taken the time to learn. So the next time your guitar teacher says, we're going to work on the C major scale this week, and we're probably going to do it for a couple of weeks, we're not going to play a tune, don't roll your eyes in the back of your head. Give that an opportunity, a chance to walk you through it, so that the fruition of it will pay off down the road. It may not be evident to you while you're doing it, but if you do things in a bit more of a stepwise manner, it pays off. That doesn't mean you can't go sideways once in a while and do some funky stuff that has nothing to do with any of this. Just go and bang on the guitar, have some fun, play some tunes, have at it. But come back to that spine, that centerpiece, knowing that by every step you take, if you're doing it in a logical fashion, it's going to reduce the amount of overwhelm that I think a lot of guitarists get, because they don't understand how one concept fits with another. How do arpeggios relate to a scale? How do chords relate to arpeggios and scales? And how do I know how to play this chord in different locations on the fretboard? It's too much. They're overwhelmed. So hopefully that's not you. If you like this video, you know what to do. Press the like button, share it around, and if you haven't, if this is your first viewing of the channel, by all means, why not subscribe while you're here? You'll be getting a video each week, and the whole lesson has a PDF associated with it that you can access. It's in the notes below the video here. Just give me your best email, and I'll send that PDF to you totally free, and it follows the same stuff that we covered today. So you've got it in writing. Hope to see you on the next video in this series. We're going to extend this idea continually a little further down the road, so to give you a sense of what it's like to do this in a more sequential fashion. And until then, Steve Dempster from Guitar Evolutions. See you later. Bye.